Folks, today's discussion is going to be about, as the title says, next generation data mesh operating model. So I guess the first question is why do we actually need to talk about operating models? Well, as you're probably aware, if you're implementing data mesh or even considering it, you've probably heard in Zemac's book, she calls it a socio-technical thing. What that really means is data mesh is as much about the people, the organization, and the culture, as well as the technology stuff where we tend to spend a lot of time and focus. So operating models address the socio part of socio-technical. It talks about the people aspect, talks about culture. It talks about what needs to be in place to ensure a growing and thriving enterprise data mesh. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, the people side, the culture side. And along the way, we hope to answer probably a few really simple questions, I suppose. What does a good data product team look like? What does the organizational structure look like for that? Who do they interact with and how? And what are the incentives that actually foster useful and valuable interactions? And also, I mean, what are the rules or policies that we actually need in place to allow your data mesh to grow and thrive? Well, that's the stuff we're going to be talking about today. But first, let me introduce two brilliant people that are going to be joining us today. Tom DeWolf and Jean-Georges Perrin. So let's start with Tom. Tom, why don't you give us a quick intro? Tell us what you do for a living.
Hi, Eric. I'm Tom. I'm a consultant in Belgium for ACA Group, and I'm currently doing a lot of architecture expertise consulting around data mesh specifically. Started, I think, 15, 16 years ago in developer roles and architecting roles of software that we built. With the last 3-4 years, I went deep dive into data and data mesh and found a lot of principles that were the passion in my software engineering days coming back into the data mesh space. So that's where I can apply my passion again. So that's me. And also, maybe the host and of the data mesh meetup that Paul also mentioned, of which in June, that is the third installment that we have. So if you're in Belgium, do come.
Perfect. And by the way, Tom also has some outstanding posts on LinkedIn that are must read, in my opinion. So you'll find him there quite a bit. JGP, I'm sure everybody knows about you, but tell us about yourself and what you do for a living anyway.
I don't know. It keeps changing. So for a living, I'm the chief innovation officer for a startup called Aida. And we may or may not do things in software and products around data mesh, data contracts and data products. But I'm also honored to be writing the book implementing data mesh with our host here, Eric Broda. And this is going to come out real soon now, as soon as I'm finished my work, because I'm always a late one.
Perfect. Thanks, JGP. So I'll do a real quick introduction for myself. I run a small data mesh and generative AI consulting firm out of Toronto, Canada. We focus on financial services. We've implemented and designed data mesh in insurers, banks, payment firms. And we also apply on a pro bono basis data mesh capabilities to nonprofits in the climate space. That's a little bit about me. On an administrative note, each of the panel members are talking on their own behalf and not for their employers or their clients. So with that being said, why don't we get started? And we'll go with our first question. Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot. We're going to ask you the most obvious question for a session like today, which is, what is an operating model?
The most obvious question, but maybe not quite such a simple question either. But nevertheless, I think it's mainly about how do you structure the teams that are going to interplay within your, in this case, your data mesh journey, and how do they interact with each other. And specifically for data mesh, I think that operating model also needs to find that balance between facilitating that decentralized ownership of data products on the one hand, and this more centralized ownership of the self-service platform on the other hand. And that also has an implication on the team structure, I think.
Absolutely. JGP, what's your perspective?
I think Tom is spot on. And I'd like to come back, when on the introduction when you were saying that we data mesh is a socio-technological platform. I think the socio is, I don't want to quantify it, but it's almost like 75% of the work. Okay, so when I built a data mesh and when I'm consulting for people building data mesh, I think that's the easy part, okay? Especially when you're coming from software, because it's all the knowledge you've brought from the software, from the agile transformation we've been doing over the last 20 years. You bring that to data. But the organizational structures and the governance of data mesh is a little bit different, and that's where it throws people off, because it says the first word being data, it relates to people that are not used to working like that, and so you've got this this change, this structural change that needs to be managed.
Absolutely. So I think what you're hearing is that, first off, operating model is about how business gets done and how the people, the team, the organizational structure works to facilitate that. And as JGP highlighted, it's not a simple endeavor to get right. So let's start talking a little bit more in depth. So let's start with the smallest unit in the data mesh organization, I suppose, which is the data product team. So tell me what is the data product team? What's in it? What roles do we have? JGP, we'll start with you.
All right. So I think first we need to demystify things, and I think we need to make sure that people are not freaking out about this change. Okay, there are changes, but there's a lot of things which already exist in most organizations. Okay, so I would say the most obvious change is a data product owner. Okay, this is kind of a bit of a new title there, but in reality, it's about identifying who owns the transformation and who owns which how the data is going to be defined. And so it's in most cases, this already exists in your organization. You just need to formalize it. The role changes a little bit, but not that much. It's like when you migrated from a project manager to a product owner or a product manager, things change a little bit, but not too much. Okay, so it's a bit of that. But otherwise, besides that, you've got your data engineering that are still doing the transformation. Okay, and they are not doing anything else than doing the transformations, okay, and the ETL pipeline and the data quality and all these things. So they keep doing this thing. So there's not a lot of impact on them. You still have your data architect, which I think is probably going to have an extended role in a way. And that's about it. Okay. From my perspective, of course you can make the organization more complex, but that would be kind of the minimal roles you would have into a data product team.
Perfect. Sounds simple. Tom,
It is.
you've done this many times. I'm sure it's not as simple as JGP says. What when you structure a team, a data product team for your clients, tell me how big is that team? What specific roles? Is it all covered by JGP stuff, or what's your perspective?
I think the role that JGP mentions of the data product owner is certainly essential. What we did is make a split between the more business-oriented product owner of a data product and the more technically oriented owner of a data product. And the latter can also be the data engineer, but just to have that two types of contact when you have questions about the data product, so to say. And next to that, we really use the term data product developer because it's in some cases it's not always the data expert, data engineers that are doing the data product developer, but also more generalist software engineer. So that's why we use the specific term of a data product developer to name them both. But I think the main thing that a data product team has to do is to be the expert on the data they own and have that domain knowledge. And ideally, it's even the same team that's also owning the applications and the source systems. But of course, you have to make sure that all the skills that are required are within that team. And for simple data sources, then the more generalist developers can be enough. But if the volumes of data or the complexity of the data processing that needs to be done is more advanced, then I think embedding data engineering expertise within those teams is really essential.
Well, Tom, let me drill down a bit on that. So one of the things I see with my clients is we all know that a data product owner has significant decision rights about the data product the data that's in their data product. But how far do those decision rights go? How much autonomy do they actually get? So let me give you a simple example that I've seen. So one of the dynamics is the data product owner says, or let's start with the architecture team says, you need to actually use Snowflake, for example. The data product owner says, my team has no experience in Snowflake, but we use MongoDB all the time. So I want to go MongoDB. But the enterprise architecture team says that's not the standard, for example. So where does this decision rights actually apply? Who makes the call? How much autonomy does a data product owner actually have?
Well, I think I'm coming back to what I said earlier, that the data product team has the ownership of the data products itself, right? And on the other hand, there's the ownership of a self-service platform to support that and facilitate that. And the decisions on which technologies are available within that self-service platform is, I think, something that the platform team is taking. And so there's no complete autonomy on the infrastructure and technology stack for data product teams. Also because what Samak wrote, that the total cost of ownership shouldn't skyrocket, of course. But if you then think about platform engineering and providing a self-service platform, then it's also about, okay, that's the golden path, and for 80% of the cases. But try to make sure that if some certain teams want to experiment, for example, with MongoDB or something else, that there's also a possible path to do that, to learn from that, and to maybe even promote that as part of the platform capabilities. But of course, then you need the interactions between that data platform, data product team and the platform team to do that.
Okay. JGP, I know you smiled at the start when we started this question. Where's your head at? I mean, you worked at PayPal way back in the day, financial services firm, probably very rigorous in their data management practices. How much flexibility did when you see data product owners, how much flexibility did they have, and was it the right answer, I suppose?
When I worked at PayPal, I was working with risk, which is, I'd like to say it's a, you know, it's a bit of, I cannot say too much about PayPal, but the thing is, the way the company is structured is that, it's a huge company, 30,000 people at that time, and risk was different organizations that, for example, transactions. So when you're a PayPal customer and you do your transaction with your friends or merchants, this is taken care by an entire operational team that is really top notch. Okay, so really brilliant people, and not saying we didn't have brilliant people, but it's a bit of a different things when it comes to the analytics on the risks that is derived from this from this transaction after. And that's where we were lucky enough to be there. So we had some autonomy in how we wanted to treat things. Okay, so because it's analytics, I wouldn't say it's less good data, but it's a little bit more flexible. So this model was really good, and this is where really we could experiment with the federated aspect of it. Okay, so when you're thinking about how we can structure data mesh, and that was a brilliant experience. At least it was very learning for me, very enlightening for me. But I was thinking about, and why I was chuckling was more about the aspect of enterprise architect. I was an enterprise architect for some time. I love architecture. I co-wrote a book with Nick Tune on modernizing architecture. So, but nevertheless, and promotion apart, I think that data mesh should abstract you from those pesky details of implementation, and the operating model should be wide enough to let you choose what you want that does a job. Okay, so that's a very a belief I go by, because the thing is, at PayPal, for example, we had some freedom, but if I wanted to bring something completely new, it would have been pretty difficult because it was not part of the set of tools that we were highly recommended to use, and I think that makes sense. But the thing is, data mesh being agnostic in many ways from the tooling you use really helped promote the platform as well.
Yeah, I'm going to run a scenario by you. So I'm also, by the way, I would call myself a reformed global chief architect, in the sense that my thinking has evolved significantly over my career. So I would start early in my career. I thought architecture had the right to make decisions, technology decisions on behalf of the firm. And what I very quickly, well, evolved, maybe not so quickly sometimes, I suppose, came to the conclusion that and I think JGP, you and I have talked about this, that the architecture team, as an example, is a facilitator of helping other groups come to the right decision. So for example, and from a data mesh perspective, this is a long-winded setup for a question, by the way. From a data product perspective, the dynamic that I found most successful was where the enterprise architecture team, again, not to pick on them, but they had a select set of platforms that they wanted you to use. But ultimately, we did give significant rights to the data product owner. But we also said, by the way, if you want to pick this database, this technology that we do not have in the organization, you also, by the way, are going to shoulder the burden of security, operability, support, resilience, all that type of stuff in your own budget. Whereas if you actually work with the enterprise platform, you get some of those shared costs. So the dynamic that we got, which we found particularly useful, was the architecture team provided guidance and options, and transparency to the decision-making process. But ultimately, it was a decision right that the data product owner had. It's just they had to do it completely eyes wide open. Is that a dynamic, Tom, that you've seen that you think is worthwhile?
Well, indeed, there is some tension between certainly if there's a separate architecture team within a company, between the architecture team setting or deciding on what can be used, and within a data mesh model, I think the architecture team indeed has the opportunity to really become what's called an enabling team for your data mesh operating model. And then I refer back to the team topologies terminology for that. And it can be an enabling team to help domain teams or data product teams to apply the right architecture patterns for data products or the like. But there can also be an enabling team towards the platform team to have the bigger picture and to see which tag is available in the company, which can fit in the platform or not. So yeah, from a going more to a facilitating role, as you said, and instead of being the ones that need to decide everything.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the book Team Topologies. Zemak also mentioned it in her book. I highly recommend it. So that being said, You mentioned a few of the team name type or team types. So platform teams, you mentioned enabling teams, and I think there's also a complicated subsystem, which we'll push aside for a moment here. But tell me the interaction between the data product team, which is a stream-aligned team in team topologies terms. What's the interaction model between a data product team and a platform team?
Yeah. Well, a data product team, as you said, stream-aligned team, so that means that are the teams that are delivering the value, and they should focus on that delivery value chain and be enabled to do that quickly and easily. And the platform team is actually providing a service to them. So the interaction mode between that streamlined team of a data product team and that platform team is to provide that platform as a service. But there's one nuance on that, in the sense that in the beginning, for example, you don't have a fully fledged platform yet. And in that sense, with the first data product teams, it will be more interaction and intense collaboration between both of those teams. And we've even started with a platform team that also did the first data product development to have a bit of your eat your own dog food effect. And to learn from that, and then scale a bit further than that. And when that platform becomes more stable, the self-service is more stable, then it can really become an interaction mode in the as a service situation.
Perfect, Tom. Hey, we have a question from the audience, and by the way, we encourage this, so feel free to bombard us with some of the tough questions. But Ricardo Cruz has asked, so JGP, I'll put this one to you. What is your advice to someone that is facing a challenge to support a data mesh transition that combines on-prem and cloud tools, and talk about it from a platform perspective?
So before I answer your question, Ricardo, I have two things. Okay, so really quickly, coming to the conversation we just had. So for me, an architect is 80% technical and 20% business, and a product owner is 20% technical and 80% business. So in that scenario, yeah, the architect can come with saying, "Oh, I want to use Mongo, for example, or something." It depends who's going to implement it, and as you said, okay. So, but the thing is, the product owner might not, or the data product owner might not make too much technical decision. I don't see this role. Okay, we didn't go through the job description, I would say, of the product owner, but I don't think that's his mission statement there. And on Tom, I don't eat my own dog food, but I drink my own champagne. Okay, and I agree. That can only work with French people. Okay, but you've got excellent beer in Belgium, so probably you can adapt that to your
Yeah, drink your own beer. Yeah, why not?
Dog food doesn't
Guys,
take a beer.
you guys are making a case for me coming to Belgium to go to this meetup here. But JGP, let's answer Ricardo's question.
Okay, sorry. So I think so. I had many haha moments when I read Jean-Marc's book. Okay, but one of my favorite moment is probably the experience planes, and which I think it's chapter 7 in our book.
I think it's chapter 7. Then we cover other parts of it a little bit later.
Yeah, full promo. Anyway, but the thing is, the infrastructure is at the infrastructure experience plane. Okay, so that's kind of the low level. And for me, the infrastructure can be this hybrid system, this hybrid cloud. Everybody's doing some kind of hybrid clouds these days, okay? So you've got people that have still things on-prem that are using AWS, and they don't know really. 1 week they want to migrate, 1 week they want to go back on-prem. So the thing is that debate for me is at the infrastructure experience point. So, but you start building your data product in the data product experience plane, and because you're starting to build that, you've got to find a way and a mechanism to interact between the different plane. For me, that's mainly the data contracts, okay, and probably some few other artifacts, but that's one way to interact. And then you've got the last plane, which is the mesh experience plane, where the meshing happens, okay. But so that's how I isolate the physical infrastructure plane from the usability plane of your data product. I hope I answered your question, Ricardo.
Yeah, so I think you had a great answer, Ricardo. I'm going to take a slightly different perspective on this. This perhaps shows my age, but there's a song, I think Rod Stewart did it, from Cat Stevens. The first cut is the deepest, and I'll apply it to data mesh. Your first data product is the hardest, and arguably the single most important. So here's what I would say, Ricardo, is John George and Tom's advice is spot on from a organizational perspective, incentives perspective, practical perspective. Your very first data product is what everybody's going to hear about. You don't have a second chance to make a first impression. You want to get it right. In other words, line up a very strong business sponsor. Make sure there's a very good rationale and value proposition, maybe a business case for doing that, and then line up an expert set of capabilities for the data product team. And as Tom has highlighted many times, make really good friends, to paraphrase what Tom's saying, make really good friends with your platform teams, because you're going to be relying on them quite a bit. So, Ricardo, hopefully that gives you some good advice. I want to talk, we talked a little bit at the start of the discussion around this thing called culture. So culture is kind of that mystique about your organization. Kind of it's a way of describing how it does its business. But I'm gonna translate into something a little bit more specific. So when I think of culture, I think of a continuum. I think of, on one side we have the centralized command and control model, which may be the armed forces, perhaps, is a great example. And it definitely works for that type of organization. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the completely or fully distributed model, what we have is open source communities, which work in some of the most important software in the world is open source now. So clearly that works also. So start with the JGP on this one. When you think about the continuum of command control versus fully distributed, what do you need to think about when you're at kind of the extremes, and then what's the right middle point that you might want to aim for? Like, nobody thinks the data mesh is going to change the culture of the organization, but how do you accommodate it depending on where you are in that continuum?
I think, and I know that's a topic Eric and I we don't always agree on, but it's okay. The culture is really important, and what I've experienced a lot in different companies, not only data mesh, right? It's really about decentralization versus decentralization, okay, and of the data. When I think it's really about, for those of you in the US, you can think about that as how the countries govern. Okay, so you've got the state and you've got the federal space, and that's why we call this a federation. And I think this is where we are aiming towards. Okay, so you've got the centralized way. We know it's not really working. We've got the fully decentralized way, which results in often chaos. And because then, and I'm not going back to the debate with enterprise architect, but the thing is, there is enterprise architect for a reason, because I try to have some kind of, at least somehow a middle ground. And then So we need to explore this federated way of doing things, which is which uses a lot and relies on communication. Okay, so we really need to make sure that people communicate more than they probably do now. And I think that's also one thing that data mesh is bringing is those communication means that are really important to to the success of the platform.
Okay, so Tom, what's your perspective when you look at your client base without mentioning names, obviously? Are where are your clients typically in that continuum? Are they more the command control? Are they more the open source, let 10,000 flowers bloom type approach? Where do you see your clients, and what kind of advice um, do you have to take advantage of the culture that already exists, or do you actually try and change some of it? Where do you see your clients, and what type of advice do you give them?
Well, it differs a lot, and it even with one client, it depends on which point of view. For example, if you take on the one hand governance, it can be that for an organization that's at the current moment a fully centralized model. But if you talk about ownership then of data, then that same company could be in the full opposite, in the more distributed part of the continuum. So I think here it's also to find the balance between that central and decentral approach that at that moment in time fits your culture, and then see how it can evolve towards a more ideal ideal operating model where you have that decentralized data products and central platform ownership. But at least, for example, if governance is a top-down model and centrally decided, that can be fine, but then maybe at least complemented with a collaboration model to take those policies and have working groups with the representatives of the data product teams to think about how to make it happen, how to apply the policy. Or for the ownership, if we take the example of the data mesh we did in the cultural sector, there are a lot of smaller organizations within that sector that just don't have any IT skills. So the ideal of that each of those smaller organizations is going to own the data product development is utopia. But there are multiple mediating stakeholders or players within that sector, the more major players or stakeholders. And if the target is that those sector players take on ownership in name of those smaller companies, then you also have a decentralized model, but that's more fit for purpose for that sector or for that case. So I think it's important to really think about, okay, what's the current situation concerning governance, concerning ownership? Try to start there, fit the operating model on it as it is at the moment, so that you have also the least tension to get started, and then try to evolve towards something that's optimal but also realistic.
Okay. Well, I always like to apply real world analogies. So if I'm not mistaken, Belgium has 3 official languages. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, there's distinct regions within Belgium that have those particular languages. In other words, I don't know if they call them states or counties or provinces in Belgium, but there's a great example of a country that has very distinct languages. I would suggest maybe even culture, but there's a governing thing we call the country that actually makes it all work. Tell me, let's use that as an analogy. Tell me, because I don't know that much about Belgium, but what does the central government do, and are they called provinces or states? I don't know, or region.
Yeah, in English, I don't know how, but you can call it states.
Okay, so what does the federal government do versus the states, and how does it apportion the rules, the responsibilities? And then obviously we're going to try and apply that to data mesh, which is like there's a enterprise set of policies, and then there's data product policies. So tell me about Belgium and how does that work and apply it to data mesh, perhaps?
First of all, I wouldn't take Belgium as the ideal operating model for a federated situation. Far from it.
Nevertheless, it works, it seems.
But it started from a completely central federated governance model and evolves towards a more decentralized approach, but it's a bit in between, and it's not that logical what is placed on which level. So I wouldn't take that as a metaphor and as an example. That being said, I think when you apply it on data mesh, that what happens on the more central level and next to the platform, when you look at governance, it should focus on interoperability, that everything that's happening within the different teams can keep working together, and that you define policies for that. Let's, for example, take the example of the typical enterprise data model, and the way it has been done in the past of the canonical model that covers the whole enterprise failed often. So that's a fully decentralized approach, but you could also look at it as a federated enterprise data model in which each domain models its part of that enterprise model that represents the domain that's contributed to a more overarching view or holistic view of the whole company. And then the governance focuses on what are the interconnections between those models, what are the very concretely, what are the identifying business keys of the different concepts that should be present in the data, so that when data from a domain about customers and data in a domain about financial transactions, they want to correlate that at least there is something to do that with. So in that example, the governance focuses on the how things can collaborate and interoperate, and the autonomy of the model is still within the domain teams. And I would apply that to most of the challenges that are within a data mesh or data management situation.
Okay, good answer. Good answer. We have two questions. So JGP, we're going to start with you, and then Tom, you get the second question here. Canal has asked, hi, JGP, Tom, I have two questions. Should you have a data steward's role in data business analysts, SMEs, or keep the roles simple as data product owner and business stewards and technical stewards? So I'll start, JGP, with you on that one.
Yeah, I think that's part of the cultural change that you will have to experience and see by yourself. The data steward, I worked with several ways of defining what a data steward was. Somewhere at the enterprise level, and by that you can see a synonym to the discussion we just had about federation. Okay, so I did kind of a and I've seen also data steward as part of the embedded team, or kind of almost a SME. Their roles were also really different in different organizations. Sometimes they were attached to data governance, sometimes they were attached to data engineering, sometimes they were part of the team directly involved in building the data products. So it's not a black and white answer here, but I think it's something that is on the way out. It's a role for me that I think should be on the way out as a steward, not as a person. Okay, I think that the role is evolving, and I think that it's a good candidate for a data product owner. Okay, so that's my vision. And as I was saying before, okay, so the product owner, whether it's a data product or just a product owner, being 80% of the business oriented, okay, then he should be in a way the business me as well. But it's not always possible, but I think this is what the closest should be to a business. And so so I've seen, I've seen also models where people wanted to have two owners per data product, like a technical owner and a and a business owner. It really that's part of the discussions when you build, and depending on the enterprise and the level of change you want to bring to the enterprise. You may There might be some kind of an ideal, but the thing is, the ideal might be too much of a breaking change, and then you may lose people on the on the way on your journey. So you may just want to compromise as well, and saying, okay, well, we're not going to have data product owner, but we're just going to call them data steward. When you look at what we're working on at the level of data contracts, we voluntarily left all the roles as open-ended fields. Okay, so that you can have any kind of roles you want there, because every organization has a different way to name people, to give them role, to define them, and it can be fairly complex. So we didn't want, and my position is, let's not add complexity where it's not needed to add complexity there. Um, and that's where change management is really important. So,
Okay,
be
perfect.
soft.
Okay. Tom Cannell has a second part to his question. I'll paraphrase it, but it looks like a simple one. I'm sure it's not easy to answer, but who should the data product owner report to? Central governance office, the business? What do you see working?
Oh, reflecting on that, I think it's also a question of which team is the data product owner part of? What is and the shared responsibilities there? And I think he is part or she is part of the team, the streamline team that's delivering the value, and that's so it's part of the domains and the businesses. And for pure reporting, I would find it logical that it's within that business unit. Of course, when you talk about governance, then that data product owner also has the responsibility to join the governance team and collaborate on that, so that policies across the company are agreed and implemented and so on, so that not every team remains on its own island, but there's still interaction between them.
Okay. Tom, we have another question from MR Foundation MR. Not sure what that stands for, but I'm going to put it to you, Tom, and I'll paraphrase here. How do you change a business unit or analytics department into a data product team?
Okay, that's a big question. But I think there are two aspects on that. One is, okay, they have to have the ability to actually create, develop, and implement and manage the life cycle of data products. So that means getting the necessary skills for that, and there is a bit of technical skills within that. So making sure, for example, data engineers are embedded in it or something like that. So that's one part of it, and the other part is product thinking and that's a way of thinking about data, not just as a side effect of what they're doing, but as something that you have to take care of, provide some love to, and to interact with the ones that need it, so that you know their requirements and can model the data in a way that's optimally usable for them. So to really be the product manager of your data. And I think that are two changes that have the most impact.
Perfect.
Or something new for those teams.
Okay. JGP, simple question, not a simple answer, I'm sure. What role does governance play in the operating model? This is from the same person, MR Foundation.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of data governance. Okay, so and I think it really depends a lot on the type of industry, if you're in a regulated industry or not. Okay, so because the importance of data governance is different there. Uh, I think that not a lot of people do data governance just for the fun of doing data governance. So it's more. I think it's more like oh, it's because we must do it, and then it will depend which part of the data governance are you going to put where. Um, an example, for example, about policies. Okay, so when you define policies in data governance, uh, one example I witness and I often use is the how much time you should keep your records. Okay, so the length um of how long you should keep your data. Um, and for example, financial records in a lot of countries it's 7 years, but in Australia it's 10 years. Okay, so who's making the call for Australia when you are a global organization? Are you asking someone in the suburb of Liège to make the decision of for that part, or are you going to trust someone with field expertise in Sydney? And I think this is where you've got to structure your federated governance, okay, in a way that you can allow this kind of flexibility. And so I would say when you're saying will it be the product owner or the solution architect in the product team, I think it's neither of them, to be honest. I think it's if it's neither on both of them at the same time. That's what I mean. Okay, so it depends on whether the data governance part is a business constraint or like this or legal constraint, like the 7 years versus 10 years, for example, or if it's a technical constraint as well. So, like
Okay.
for example, yeah, you can have technical constraints there as
Okay.
well.
One of the things that I see constantly, there's a balance, a tension between agility and cost efficiency. The IT organization has many measures, but one of them that seems to be very, very predominant is cost, the cost of my IT services. Businesses, on the other hand, have typically a profit and loss, a P&L, accountability. They need to generate revenue, and they prize agility over just about agility and speed over just about everything else. How do I get my product into market ahead of my competitors, for example? This is really a question about culture. Do you prize cost efficiency versus agility? And ultimately, it's a question around incentives. How do you actually balance the two and set the incentives in place to allow that to balance? Like I said, early in my career, I thought architects, not to again pick on them, I was one, architects would strongly favor cost efficiency. But the businesses we talk to, especially now, it's all about speed and agility. What's the balance, and how do you actually set up the incentives? Because that's one of the most important parts of an operating model, setting up the incentives so folks will naturally do the right thing, as it were. So, Tom, tell me, how do you balance that agility, speed, and cost efficiency equation?
Mhm. Well, I think it's putting them against each other is not necessarily the right way of looking at it. So it's not efficiency, cost efficiency, and standardization versus agility. I think they both can complement each other, and that platform versus a streamlined teams model can enable that. So the platform also has the more cost efficiency and standardization driver in it, and they try to do that. But at the same time, providing something self-service so that the streamlined business teams can focus on that agility to deliver data products quicker, to deliver data use cases quicker, and to have that business agility. So for me, it's not something that's opposed to each other. It's something you can both, yeah, achieve both actually. So that's my view on it.
JGP, I know you have an opinion on this one. Where's your head at?
I think they should. I'm a bit like what Tom was saying. I think there should not be an opposition between the two. I think I think it's a balance. We need to find the right balance. It's easy to say. I've you know I'm an architect, I would say, and I'm also an agilist. I've followed the training and I'm certified for for the safe architecture. It was really difficult. It was really something I was really, you know, I think passing the thing was really something which was really, I think, really difficult. And this is all this whole balance of trying to of mixing agility and but it should not be an opposition. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of those things that I've seen is, first off, I agree 100%. They're not either or. And in fact, the irony in this is what I've seen is if you get agility and speed, we all know that project costs are almost linearly correlated to project duration. So if I can get speed and agility, okay, I shorten my project duration and I actually get cost efficiency. So that's what I've actually. It doesn't happen every time. Agile projects don't necessarily come in at low costs, but in many cases, if you deliver speed and agility, you not only get the business benefit. Obviously, the business loves you, but you actually get cost reduction. Is that something Tom or JGP you've seen?
Well, cost reduction, I project that always on the platform team and how good the platform is. And so, for example, if you have a situation where there are 100, no, not 100, but 10 different platforms within the organization, then having an initiative to come to a self-service platform that maybe cleans that up a bit and makes it more uniform. And for example, have only 1 or 2 technologies instead of 10 to do the same thing. That of course has some cost reduction. And if the driver from the business side is to have the agility to do it quickly themselves through self-service, yeah, that has that as a side effect. And yeah, I don't know, Josh, what you mean. Think about this.
Yeah, I think there's another parameter, Eric, is just being able to deliver. Okay. I see so many projects there where I just go to trash, okay, because um, you know, I'm always baffled by the number of the percentage of success on an IT project, whether it's data or software. Um, but but agility is one way to do it. Okay, so when we implemented our data mesh at PayPal, we managed in this pretty big organization to deliver it on time and at 60% of the budget. So we were 40% less that what was estimated and budgeted for. So they said, yeah, that's great. Okay, so I'm just great because I did it. But at first, it's a team. It's not only me. It's a whole team there. Uh, but it's also because we followed, I think, a lot of agile principles. So first we delivered, okay, just we delivered. Then the second success is we delivered on time, and then we delivered under budget. And I think this is we had to balance, okay, this discussion between the enterprise architect, between InfoSec, which you can imagine at PayPal is not something light, um, um, as and all the other stakeholders that are there. So the way you organize your team, the way you work around all these things, and I'm not saying around like trying to go around, but really embed all these things. I think agility is really the way you can do it. Okay, I remember my first when I was out of college doing my first project in waterfall, this would have just been a nightmare if we wanted to have something like that in a waterfall model, because it just wouldn't work, right? So I think you've got to engage the different people, okay, whether it's the enterprise architect, the data governance, and you've got to be a little bit political with them. Not too political, not like, not like crazy political, but the thing is more like saying, okay, we're going to win that together, and because we're going to win that together, when the project is going to be a success, it's also going to be partially thanks to you. Okay, so I think this is something we have to do that. We have to be human beings, and create a cohesion, a work team, and not a fighting spirit. But I've been in an organization where the enterprise architects have just a fighting spirit because they think they're God and you don't have anything to say. But
Uh,
you've
yeah.
got to change that. You don't
Well,
have
these
to
are
be French all the time.
this is better to sometimes be Canadian, right? As they say.
Exactly.
There you go. We are at time. We have about 30 seconds left. So I'm just going to say a few things. First off, thank you very much to the Data Mesh Learning community for hosting us here.
Thanks, Paul.
There's a few questions in the chat that we did not get to. I strongly encourage you to go to the Data Mesh Learning community Slack channel, ask the question. There's 6,000 or 7,000 members by now, probably more, and they're pretty active. So we will strive to answer your questions there. With that in mind, I'd just like to say thank you very much to my brilliant participants here, JGP and Tom DeWolf. These folks are amazing. If you're in Belgium, you got to go to the meetup. And whatever JGP is doing in Boston, it's got to be a must-see event. So anyway, thank you very much for your time and patience, and hopefully you've learned a little bit about data mesh operating models. With that, wish you all the best.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, everybody, have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.